Hi again, I'm Jack Lessenberry, and welcome back to Politics and Prejudices, the podcast. This is sort of an evolution of the columns I did and the radio commentaries I did in other forums for many years, so I hope you enjoy and keep listening. You can also catch up with both my writing and any podcast or essays you may have missed on my website and blog, lessenberryinc.com. That's ink as in ink pen. So please settle in, listen, and stay tuned for my signature essay afterwards. So a very interesting topic this year, third parties in this year's very contested and very fascinating election. There's no question that some people blame third parties, especially the Libertarians and the Green Party, for Donald Trump's surprising election 4 years ago. 6 million people nationally voted for either the Green or Libertarian candidates for president, and the difference was far more than Trump's winning margins in most states, including Michigan. The leaders of those parties say, correctly, that they not only do they have as much right as the Republicans or the Democrats to run, they aren't running to tip any election, they're running to let people know what they believe in and stand for and to try to win support. Well, how will all that play out this year? Joining us now to talk about their parties and the 2020 campaign are two people who've been down this way before. Jennifer Kurland is the Green Party candidate for governor of Michigan in 2018 and polled nearly 30,000 votes. She's now the party's communications director and thinks that despite the conventional wisdom, the Greens may do even better this time, noting that they have some conservative ideas as well as liberal ones. Jennifer, welcome. Bill? You became the Libertarian Party's candidate for governor 2 years ago after winning the party's first ever statewide primary. That was the first primary you folks ever had, wasn't it?
It is.
Okay. And he didn't win the governor's election, but he got a record, nearly 60,000 votes. He's been building the party for years and is a successful business owner in the Grand Rapids area. Bill, thanks for coming down. Thanks for being here today. And the first question, I assume that both of you, correct me if I'm wrong, think that Donald Trump has been a disaster as president. If this is the case, does it make sense for Libertarians and Greens to run their own presidential candidates this year? We'll start old-fashioned chivalry, ladies first. Jennifer, what do you think, and should you folks be running a candidate for president this year?
Absolutely.
Well, tell me why. What's your reasoning?
Well, we are a separate political party. We have a separate, belief system. We have separate values. We have separate issues that we campaign on that are not addressed by the other major parties. And our presidential candidate actually is really important to our party because they are the main person that helps us continue to keep ballot access across the country.
Okay, but would you say that means that let's say, and this is quite possible, this will come down to a major party race between Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders. Would you say there's not a dime's worth of difference, as George Wallace used to say, between those two folks?
Well, there is a difference, but there's still problems with Bernie Sanders and his campaign, and I would say it's very likely that he probably won't get the nomination, even though he is polling, the best out of all of those candidates. But there are, many Greens that, are not interested in supporting Bernie Sanders because Bernie Sanders does not share their values. We have different values from Bernie Sanders, including, heavily anti-war. We are very pro, freeing Julian Assange and the free press, and that's something that hasn't been addressed by any of the Democrat candidates. So there's very important, issues that are not addressed by the Democrats, even Bernie Sanders.
Bill Giordano, same question for you.
Well, I think I would agree with a lot of what Jennifer just said. I think it's actually maybe even a little bigger than that, in that the third-party movement across the country has been growing enormously, and I think it speaks volumes to the dissatisfaction with the two major parties. And as long as they continue to promote an ideal in our democracy that all we get is these two choices, and they do everything possible to silence the voices of any alternative thought.
Right.
For me, the real answer becomes advocating for things like ranked choice voting, and I think that's something that we would both agree with.
Absolutely.
And so if the Democrats and Republicans want a situation where their standard bearer that gets the most votes or earns the most electoral votes has the opportunity to be the winner, then give us the opportunity through a process like ranked choice voting to have our voices heard. Because I don't agree that our membership would necessarily vote for either one, in that we're kind of split the same way. We have different value systems, and probably a third may lean Democrat, a third may lean Republican if, the Colt 45 test.
Right.
But a third would
What's the Colt 45 test?
Well, that's in business, we always say, when you're training someone, can you do something? And they say, oh, I can't. And when you put the Colt 45 up to their head and suddenly they can do it, we realize it wasn't a question of talent, it was a question of motivation. And,
If
that's,
you asked me to do anything athletic, I'd fail even with the Colt 45.
yeah. Well, and that's the thing about our democracy now is
Right.
you're given these two choices, which are put together in very dubious ways. I mean, I think there's been a lot of discussion about how Iowa and New Hampshire are hardly representative of the populace of the rest of the country, and yet we may be down to a couple choices pretty quick, and that's, I think, unfortunate, because not only do we not have a choice that's realistic, and so they're going to get back to that lesser of two
Right.
evils thing.
Or as somebody once said to me, the evil of two lessers.
The evil of two
Yes.
Well, Iowa is totally representative of people who are willing to stay in a basement gym on a Monday night for 7 or 8 hours. I think that's
Exactly.
that's like most people I know, especially people with young children. Well, ranked
People who
choice
are
vote.
disabled, et cetera. Yeah.
Well, exactly.
Yeah, there's a
Or
lot of
people like who
problems with
work.
caucuses. Yes.
Yeah, have jobs.
Have
Yeah.
jobs. Ranked choice voting, let me state what this is, and you folks correct me if I'm wrong. In its simplest form, you would go to the polls, and they have this in a lot of European countries. You would vote for your first choice and your second choice. And then they would add up the first choice votes, and if nobody had 50% plus, they would add in the second. So you could have, for example, let's say that candidate A got 45% of the vote in the first round. Candidate B got 40%, but more people voted for B in their second choice. B might then win.
Yeah, usually it's a matter of dropping the lowest ranked candidate that's in there, and then those candidates that voted for
Right.
candidate D, for example,
Right.
their votes would be recast, and then if nobody's gotten to 50%, then candidate C would be dropped, and the same process.
I'm in favor of it,
It's
but
actually-
only with two places, because I think it would drive people would go crazy if they had to vote 3 or 4.
Yeah.
5.
Well, it's actually very similar to how the caucuses are actually
Absolutely.
In
run.
Iowa, that's
Right?
exactly
Yeah,
right.
you know, like,
Except you would
people
do it
show
in the
up-
privacy of the voting booth rather than
Exactly.
having peer pressure.
Yeah,
Correct.
so we actually have our very first U.S. Senate candidate running in the very first ranked choice vote for U.S. Senate in Maine right now,
Right.
Lisa
Yeah.
Savage. So she's working really hard, and that is a winnable race because it is a ranked choice vote. And so, those kinds of things, especially for third parties, allows people to be more expressive, especially when they get hit with all of this fear of if you don't vote for X, then you're going to get X, right? And then,
So do you think there are a lot of people who said, I'm kind of attracted to the Greens. I like Jennifer Kurland, but I'm so afraid Bill Schuette's going to win that I couldn't vote for her.
yeah, absolutely.
Well, we
You
went
would
through
say-
that. I
right.
mean,
I've had people tell me that, yeah.
my name was in the Detroit News poll, and I got 7%.
Mm-hmm.
Well, at the end of the election, it was nowhere near that. And-
1.3, I think.
Yeah,
Right.
and that's because, which, for me is still, I'm very proud of the fact it was a record for
Right.
not only our party, but other than
Right.
the Tisch party, we did the best ever in the state. And what it comes back to is the fear factor,
Mhm.
and I had people who spoke to me and said, I really like what you stand for, and I'd like to vote for you, but I really can't stand Jennifer, either Bill
Right.
Schuette or Gretchen Whitmer.
Right.
And so they end up going back to the lesser of two evils. And rather than being able to actually stand on some of the issues that we felt were really important.
There are people who think that, because they've told me so, that the Greens are more extreme Democrats, the Libertarians are more extreme Republicans.
Yeah.
Speak to that from your side.
Yeah, I don't know how Jennifer would want to characterize the Greens, and I think one of the things that I've tried to not do as a candidate is characterize other people's ideas.
Right.
The Libertarian Party is certainly a more unusual philosophical amalgam of people that come from both the left and the right. And so when I'm speaking to groups that look at it and say, well, you guys are just like the Republicans, and I say, well, I don't know that a lot of Republicans are advocating for drug liberalization, for prison reform, a lot of the ideas that come more from the left. And at the same time, when I speak to other groups, they say, oh, you're just like the Democrats. And I said, well, I don't know many Democrats that are advocating for getting rid of the income tax
Right.
and a lot of the other big government things, subsidies. You may know I was a big advocate for getting rid of Pure Michigan.
Right.
And this is a program that's had support unusually from the Chamber of Commerce and a lot of the union groups.
So, okay, so how are the Greens, you were saying, you're alluding to the fact that Greens were different than Bernie Sanders, who admits he's a socialist. The parity of the Greens, I asked the last 2 days I was in restaurants, and I asked people, what do you think of the Greens? What do you think of the Libertarians? Somebody said Libertarians, oh, They're a bunch of spoiled rich people who read too much Ayn Rand. And the Greens,
Oh,
the
poor Bill.
Greens are a bunch of environmental fruitcakes who would rather everybody starve and didn't have a job than the grass got mowed. So, so at the most extreme, that's what people think.
That's so funny. So the Green Party, we have 10 key values that are
Right.
the values that drive our party. One of them is feminism. One of them
Mhm.
is social justice.
Mhm.
So those are, typically what people consider Democrat values.
Right,
And we certainly, in many cases, are more extreme in those
right.
opinions in terms of equal pay, equal rights, equity, as well as reparations. Those are things that fall under those that certainly are more to the left of the Democrats. But then we also have things like decentralization and community-based economics, which really are more conservative values about small local government, and that small government should have more power than the state government. State government should have more power than federal government,
Republicans
et
used to
cetera.
stand for that, but
They
they
did.
don't seem to anymore.
Yes. The Green Party, our values are actually based on communalism,
Mhm.
making sure that, small communities have the ability to take care of themselves on their own. And then we have, laws that govern us that need to be governed in terms of like having equity and fair pay and, that women have the same rights as men, et cetera, especially Black women. And so, it's one of those things that in some ways, yes, we are more left of the Democrat Party, but in other ways, we're not. When you look at the box
Mhm.
of, your political spectrum, we are definitely, kind of in that bottom left box.
How do you get your ideas out, Bill?
Well, any number of ways, including this. You know,
I thought you came here because of my good looks, but that's all right.
Well-
I've been hurt before.
certainly every opportunity that I've had, not just only as a candidate, but over the years, having been an activist, two-time chairman of the party, I have the good fortune because I do have my own business that I do have the opportunity to set my schedule more than some other people have. But throughout the party, I mean, one of the things, and quite often we end up having that contrast with the Green Party because those are two voices that are out there that have built significant followings over the years. And, our focus on individual liberty has brought us people from, a more eclectic background, I think. And the notion, that we're all a bunch of spoiled rich people is kind of amusing because most of the people I know are much more grassroots oriented. And I think one of the more important contrasts that I've tried to make, I think of that character from The Patriot, the main character.
Mel Gibson character?
Mel Gibson character, they were trying to attempt to bring him into the fight in the
He
Revolutionary
didn't
War.
want anything to do with it. Those sons were attacked.
Correct. And he is talking to the local group and he's saying, I would no more have, right now I have one despot that's 3,000 miles away, and you would have me trade that for 3,000 despots a mile away. And this idea of rejecting individual liberty and not giving individuals the choice to do the things that they want to do. And I think that's one of the big contrasts is that where the Green Party and the Libertarian Party may agree on certain things, it's how you get there where the difference lies, is that we don't believe that government generally is the solution to many of those things. And as far as myself, I've often feel that, the real test of character is the extent to which you disagree with your own party. And I've got a number of things that I ran on that I felt were important opportunities to say, here's where we could work with others to make
So
change.
you're not a monolith. The Libertarians aren't like, the Stalinists that, here's what Libertarians have to believe, comrade. So you have dissension within your own party.
Well, absolutely. I mean, it's like Will Rogers said, I don't belong to an organized political party. I'm a libertarian.
I think he said Democrat, but that's it.
I understand.
He's dead, so he can't refute him.
Paraphrasing.
In Europe, I was in Europe for some time in the 1990s, and in Germany, where the Green Party was still quite strong, they were divided between what were called the Realos and the Fundies. And the Realos were people who said, well, we have to make accommodation with the system the way it is, and the fundamentalists says, no, we're going to be pure. Does that split exist in the American Green Party?
I wouldn't say that there's necessarily like a split in the Green Party, but the Green Party definitely houses people that have a lot of varying beliefs. There are people who lean communist who are Greens, but we don't have communist ideals, and our party platform
I
actually
thought
is
you had to go to the museum to see
I know,
communists,
right? But our platform is against state-sponsored
Right.
socialism, right? So that's not something we believe in,
Right.
but there are people who do believe in that
Right.
also believe in a lot of our
Right.
ideals. So we are you know, I don't want to say big tent because I know that's what the Democrats like to say about themselves, but we are a tent where people who believe in things like peace, environmentalism, public services, ensuring that we have, equal rights and
I
equity
see Bill
rights.
nodding. Do you mean the Libertarians aren't against all those things?
Well, I think that the biggest problem I see in terms of my interactions with the media is sort of the desire to characterize what a libertarian is.
Right.
And again, there is a Rand wing of the party. I think that maybe more, the party of principle. That's our tagline.
It's easier than thinking. We like to give you a label and stick it on the wall.
Yeah, and I think Gary Johnson had it correct, and there were a lot of even people in the party who felt that Gary wasn't strong enough, or
This was your presidential
candidate in
time.
2016. You bet. But I think talking about, generally speaking, more conservative economic principles, freedom-oriented principles, together with social tolerance issues, and so you have that area in which we do have intersection with the Green Party and even to some extent the Democrat and the Republican Party. We have an anarchist wing. I've never been an endorser of that. I think that speaks to not having a political party at all or a government or anything. And yet some of those people house themselves within the Libertarian Party.
I like to joke that the Libertarians are a little bit anarchist.
Yeah. Well, the Dallas Accord, which is one of the more fundamental documents that they like to wave around.
What is the Dallas Accord?
The Dallas Accord goes back to 1974. The party really came about and was formed as a result of Richard Nixon instituting wage and price controls. And so a group of people got together and said, the Rand wing and some of these minimalists, and they said, we're all real small right now, so let's have a peace treaty with the anarchists. And that's what the Dallas Accord accomplished.
I think 72 was your first presidential candidate, if I remember correctly.
Correct. And over the years, I think we've tried to, and I think folks like Harry Brown, who helped really bring us forward, and now Gary Johnson, who I think stepped outside of the political arena, being a Republican, and yet again, our value system is such that we attract from both sides, and for people who just believe in doing their own thing and not having government create strictures that cause those problems. And again, I think that there's a practical wing of the party. I would put myself in that group. I call myself a public square libertarian. And, what that means is, when you're king in the castle, when a man or a woman are in their home, they do as they wish. They really shouldn't be subject to people telling them what to do or how to behave. They can even be prejudiced if they choose. But once you hang out a shingle, then I think you're more subject to what would be commonly perceived agreement of what is acceptable behavior, which is why I endorse the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Rand Paul does not. He's someone who says, oh, no, people can be as prejudiced as they want and we'll let the market fix it. That doesn't work in a lot of small towns. And so I think that there's a role, and, where I bucked my own party, for example, was something I think you would agree on, is extending LBGT protection under Elliott Larson here in Michigan, which is the Michigan Civil Rights Act. And so there would be disagreement in our party about that. They haven't thrown me out as a result yet.
Well, here's something.
That's a huge thing in the Green Party as well. Yeah.
Here's the big problem that both of you face, and this is just sort of this was not a conspiracy. This is how our system was created. I can foresee circumstances where you could actually have a third-party independent person getting elected president. That could happen. If Ross Perot hadn't been crazy, that could have happened. But then they're going to face a Congress that's full of Republicans, 535 Republicans and Democrats. And how do you, and you've been spectacularly unsuccessful. You've just been a stray legislator or two. I don't know if the Greens have ever elected anybody to a state legislature or not.
Yes, but not in Michigan.
But not in Michigan. But you haven't been successful at the bottom levels, the grassroots level.
Yeah, we have some mayors, and we have 5 elected officials in Michigan right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
I served on my local school board.
But it's very minimalist.
We've got over, 1 to 200 people in office
Are you
across the
making
country.
progress?
Yeah, we have 800.
Yeah, absolutely.
800.
Libertarians have 800.
Yeah.
Several partisan positions. We have lots of nonpartisan positions here in Michigan. I think we've got 13 or 14 that serve in city councils or school boards and this sort of thing. And on the margin, you may even see over the arc of 40 years, there has been progress. The question is, how many generations do we have to live with the kind of corrupt system that we have until we break it? And I think that's one of the reasons why I've identified ranked choice voting as one of the things that can help break the system.
Because the system is designed to keep us out of the process and our voices out of, the media and things like that, which is why it's so nice to be here with you, Jack, because I'm sure that you had the same issue that I did, Bill, that, we would be campaigning and sending out press releases and they wouldn't get printed, they would get ignored, but then, they'd do, weird things about the Republicans and the Democrats out there.
And they would ask you, which I had to ask you, like, why are you even in here? You're going to, you're going to wreck you're going to improperly influence the election and mess it up. But coming back to that, Jill Stein got 1.4 million votes nationally, 51,000, more than any Green ever got. Now everybody is so, I mean, there are no moderate views of Donald Trump. You either love him or you hate him, as far as I can tell.
He's very polarizing.
He's very polarizing. Thank you. You said it much better than I did. How are you going to have a candidate get that kind of margin again?
I mean, like we were saying before, our presidential nominating convention is actually here in Detroit this year, July 9th through 12th.
At Wayne State University.
At Wayne State University. We're very excited to host. We have, at last count, 8 or 9 candidates that are currently running for our nomination. We have 2 officially recognized candidates that have reached certain thresholds that the party has set. Some of our other candidates are catching up as well. We potentially have a 3rd officially recognized candidate happening right now.
What's an officially recognized candidate?
So they have to have a certain number of donations. They have to have an active website, have to be filing with the FEC, have to have raised a certain amount of money. Really just making sure, because with a third party, sometimes you get people that just decide they want to try to get your nomination and put their name out there and say that they're part of your party, and they're not.
Has Vermin Supreme run in your party?
I was going to say the Libertarian field so far spans everybody from Lincoln Chafee, who had been both a Democrat and a Republican statewide official in Rhode Island and now lives in Wyoming and has become a Libertarian, to a man called Vermin Supreme, who wears a boot on his head, and his platform is passing a law requiring everybody to brush their teeth. I mean, that doesn't mean there's not nuts in both parties, but you don't have. Gary Johnson had been governor of New Mexico. He had run twice. He got more than 1 million votes the first time and got 4.5 million last time, close to that. You don't have a candidate with that stature that I can see out there.
Well, not that's jumped into the race yet.
Right.
The way I went to my first national convention, despite having been involved for 25 years, raising family and everything, it just didn't seem to work out.
Sure.
But having been elected chair again that year, it seemed important for me. I was involved in the Gary Johnson debacle in 2012, where our criminal Secretary of State at the time prevented him from being on the ballot. But that's commentary. I went down there.
He did get about 7,000 write-in votes or so in Michigan,
He did.
I think. Yeah.
And we had 17 candidates on the ballot in Orlando, and only 6 of them were allowed to be nominated. And the way that works is the delegates, each of them had a token, and if they reached a certain threshold, then you got the opportunity to participate. And of course, Vermin Supreme didn't make the stage. We had 6 pretty serious candidates. Austin Peterson, who has gone on to run for the United States Senate in Missouri, and John McAfee, the famous software designer. The point being that the party tends to attract people who have a different view of what politics should be for, and with the emphasis on individual liberty. And, looking at the 2020 election, I don't know that I yet see someone. It's certainly possible that Justin Amash, who is now independent congressman, someone that I've had the opportunity to run against. And
You ran against him when he was running as a Republican.
Correct. And I'm of the belief, and Jennifer enunciated this well early, is that you don't improve your brand by not having people run.
Right.
And so I imagine there's going to be a Libertarian candidate, and I think many people will evaluate where that person stacks up relative to what Gary Johnson did. I think what's important is to continue to break the system. I'm really proud of the fact that in 2016, Gary got 172,000 votes here in Michigan, which was, well beyond the 9,000 margin.
Right.
And I got a call from the head of, as someone who was the sitting chair of the party, I got a call from the Democratic Party, and they were incredibly angry at us for having done what we did. And I said, oh, you mean like exercise our democratic right to participate in the electoral system? We say that almost glibly.
From the Democratic Party. Not
From the
Republican.
Democratic Party, yeah, they were really.
They're so much angrier about
angry.
third parties than Republicans are. That's what I found.
Well,
Just as my
I
Did
think-
they yell at you, too?
They haven't yelled at me, but
Or at your party chair,
I've gotten no, not our party chair, but we've gotten veiled threats.
Yeah.
What kind of threats?
Just more of, people that are, telling you that, if you do these kinds of things or you run these people against these people, then this is going to happen
Yeah.
and that. And
Both parties do this.
Yeah.
I can tell you, I think the Republicans are better at holding their team together. So
Yes.
they actually
Mhm.
liberalized the law that allows for more third parties. And that activity has created more of a jam where, together with gerrymandering, the Republicans have been able to hold on to both the Senate and the House here in Michigan. That's going to break now that the Proposal 2 passed.
Yeah. And I
But-
think the other thing, too, especially against you guys, Bill, is the issue that in 2018, when Bill was running and they finally were able to have a primary, they made sure that all of the primary ballots, instead of having separate ballots so that the Libertarians would be able to get that information from the Secretary of State of who pulled the Libertarian ballot, they put it on one ballot.
Interesting.
And this year,
There's
for
two different
March,
ballots. That's
we're
right.
back to actually
Ye-
3 ballots locally because there's some, nonpartisan ballots for some
Right.
local, like the DIA millage and things like that.
Now,
But-
why was there a Libertarian primary in 2018 but not in 2020?
Well, the way the state law works is that your status as to being, we sort of inappropriately import the word major party because I think it sounds good. We were primary qualified, and that came as a result of Gary Johnson getting more than 5% of what the number was of the Secretary of State's race, which is considered more generic, I guess. And so
You got 5% of the total votes cast for Secretary of State.
in the previous election.
Previous election.
Yeah, so in 2014, that number was 140,040, which
Right.
I think will be tattooed on my gravestone. That was our goal. I mean, our goal was to break the system, and it had been done several times before by different parties. We've been through the American Independent Party with
The
Governor
Tisch
Wallace.
party, you meant the Tisch party.
Tisch
It wasn't
party.
a party. This was Tisch.
It was
a bizarre drain commissioner. I knew him from
Yeah.
Shiawassee County who had a tax issue and he ran once for governor and got that threshold, but it wasn't a true party.
No, and neither was the Reform Party.
Right.
Each of these were built around cults of personality,
Right.
which is the same with George Wallace.
Right.
Which is why, we thought maybe there might be a chance to overcome that because we
Right.
do have affiliates all over the state, quite a bit further following. And I think had the media not really beat the drum of how close the race was between Gretchen Whitmer and Bill Schuette, I think we would have done considerably better. But as it was, Bob Tisch, which is a former Republican, is the only one who ever got more votes for governor than I did.
Right.
That was not from a Democrat or Republican Party. And at the end of the day, I think we did a lot of good things and we were able to make a lot more connections. I don't see it as a singular process. I'm not personally intending to run again, but I do think going forward, advocating for issues is really important. And many of the things that I spoke about in 2018, I've got legislation in front of me here.
Jennifer, if I went to a shopping mall this afternoon and I said, ask people, are you totally satisfied with the Republican and the Democratic parties? Unless somebody was on their payroll, the answer would probably always be no.
Oh, absolutely.
So, but they still get, 90+% of the vote every time. How does if somebody's interested in the Green Party, if they think that there's a way they can make a difference,
Mhm.
how do they find out?
I think the major way, especially for, third parties that we can make a difference is locally in local elections. So our focus right now, in Wayne County specifically, is to find people to run for county commission and state rep. Because especially in Wayne County, and I'm sure this is, similar in other places across, the state.
Why Wayne County so much as opposed to Oakland or Macomb?
Well, we do have candidates running in Oakland County, and we may or may not have some candidates in Macomb. We have a couple people we're talking to right now. But it's because in Wayne County, especially in these local elections, generally Republicans stay out of those local elections because they're not electable. So they don't even recruit people to run for those offices,
Right.
which means that when people who aren't interested in either party, who don't vote in the primary, when they show up in November, they have zero choices.
Mhm.
They have one person on the ballot,
Right.
and that's it. And so we are working to change that in Wayne County. So anyone, we're currently recruiting. So anyone who's watching, if they are interested in running for office, you can contact me on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook. All of my handles are at Kurland4MI. So the number 4MI,
Now, is there a
KURLAND.
website as well?
You can go to GPM. It's the Green Party of Michigan. So migreenparty.org. That is our website. But, so you can register and become a member of the party there, but we don't have a spot to say,
Right.
I want to
Well, can
run
you
for
find
office.
out, but let me ask Bill first. Somebody thinks, some of what this guy's saying makes sense to me, but I'm not sure if I pass the litmus test to be a libertarian. How can they find out if they do?
Well, I don't think there is a litmus test, first of all. And so I would encourage someone first to go to michiganlp.org,
Mhm.
and you can sign up to interest in running for office. You can find out a lot about the party. There's certainly all kinds of documentation of things that we've supported. And
Say that
believe in.
website again for.
It's michiganlp.org.
Great.
And otherwise, I encourage people to come to my site, which is liberty4gov.org, which I intend to hand off to somebody at some point. We use that brand. We thought that out to think, maybe that would come up with some usefulness. Because I found, having run for office a number of times, how many people are using websites. They would still ask me, is this your website? No, that was my website 4 years ago.
Right.
And so we wanted to come up with a way to kind of pass that along. And in both cases, I think what I've tried to do is be a lightning rod to give people someone to talk to. One of the things that I really worked hard with my team, and we still got about 40 people working together, who are advocating for certain things that are in the legislature. We're trying to become a voice for some of the voiceless issues that are out there, like the problems with the CPS.
CPS.
The office here in Michigan that takes care of Children Protective Services.
Okay, as long as it could stand for consumer product.
Yeah, no,
So
no.
that's why I wanted
no,
you to clarify.
Children's Protective Services.
I agree. Both of you are politicians in one way. You speak in acronyms.
Yes.
The average human doesn't do acronyms.
And that shows that we've become too comfortable talking to
right.
the bureaucracy.
Yeah.
And but certainly I've been a 25-year advocate for fathers' rights in divorce. I think I was the singular party out there advocating for the Michigan National Guard in 2018, and they have a bill in the legislature, 5320, that I encourage people to go read. It's 19 whole lines, which certainly challenges the reading capabilities of a lot of Americans.
What does this bill do?
What this bill does is it protects. It actually changes the Michigan Military Act to order the governor not to cooperate with either a president of either party, and this deals with, we've had Democrats and Republicans who have put the Michigan National Guard into a theater of war without a declaration of war by Congress, and it's a violation of U.S. code as well. But
The Constitution does say Congress has the power to declare war.
Congress has the power, and so this is the state legislature, both Democrats and Republicans co-sponsored, including a representative from the Detroit area who is a serving member of the Michigan National Guard, who are 19 whole lines that basically says, unless you have these conditions, you may not put these people into a theater of war.
So they could not be sent to Iraq, say, or Afghanistan.
Correct. Having
or Iran.
Right.
Yeah.
Good point.
When I was I had a different position 10 years ago. I was a building manager, and one of the things that I did was raise and lower the flag each time the governor of Michigan ordered it done so. And it had a real severe impact on me to say, if I was ever in a position to advocate for a change, I would do that. And so I made that one of the issues that I talked about. And I'm really proud of the fact that Democrats and Republicans have been moved by that enough to sponsor a bill. And so we have someone that I see as a pretty conservative Republican, Steve Johnson, together with David LeGrand, who's a pretty liberal Democrat, coming together on something that they agreed we should slow the horses down and really check executive power. And whether it's Donald Trump or someone else, we need to make sure that the power resides in Congress and not in the president to just simply do whatever they want.
Which
Jennifer?
Congress actually has the power to do, but they have,
Failed to
not,
act.
yeah.
Well, what happened, at this time of the great nuclear scare, they thought, my God, if the Russians launch nuclear weapons, won't be time for us, so we have to cede this power to the president. And that hasn't happened. But various presidents have been engaged in various military adventures, and they've sent National Guard troops to
Well,
do
and
these.
the executive powers were expanded under Obama,
Right.
and they have continued that expansion under Trump. Both, Democrats and Republicans have voted to keep those expanded powers. So, it's really that's where the two major parties are the same,
Sure.
pretty much.
Well, final question. I can envision that among the at least 200 million people will be watching this podcast, that you may have some young people that say, you know what? It's kind of intriguing what Jennifer said. I kind of like what the Greens stand for, but I'm sorry, I have to vote for a Democrat for president. I can't risk Donald Trump getting back in. Can people like that still be green, or will you throw them out? Or
Absolutely. Because here's the thing. You can vote however you want. We don't,
right?
we advocate for grassroots democracy and
Right.
free and fair elections. But here's the thing. You can vote for president however you want if you are afraid of Donald Trump, but vote green down ballot. Vote for our candidates that are running for your local House seats, for your local county commission seats, because these are the people that really have a lot of power to make real change on the local level, and that's extremely important.
You're director of communications for the party now.
I am,
think I
yes.
neglected to mention that.
And the thing too, when we think about, the difference between the Democrats and the Republicans, both parties are responsible for what happened in Flint. And Flint still today does not have access to clean, safe drinking water. And the issues of clean water across Michigan and the issues of PFAs, et cetera, that is only expanding across the state. And the Democrats and the Republicans, neither of them have solutions for that.
Bill, any final words? Anything you want people to know that we haven't talked about?
Well, I think that one of the things that Jennifer brought up that I think is really important is that we get engaged. It's just become too easy to say, well, there's nothing I can do about that. I'm really proud of the fact that I've gotten my family, lots of people to look at issues and to realize that you can make change if you get involved and try to make things better. I do think we need to look at a more substantial change in our democracy. I don't want to keep beating the drum for
Ranked
choice voting, but there's so many other things that we need to do to restore some kind of civility in our politics.
Could Michigan adopt ranked choice voting without a constitutional amendment?
I'm not sure it could.
No,
I'm not sure it
I
could.
think it needs a constitutional
At least a
amendment.
state constitutional or federal?
Yes, state.
State's easier to do.
State, yeah, and certainly I find we talked about Maine, parts of Utah are using it, and I thought interestingly, the federal court stepped in St. Clair Shores, where there's a lawsuit about the ward system in St. Clair Shores, and the federal court actually instituted ranked choice voting as the solution, and so it really
There are small communities across the country that
absolutely
have ranked choice voting, too.
And they got all kinds of things. It passed in Ferndale about 15
Right.
years ago.
But they didn't use it.
Well, they didn't use it because the state told them they
state, yeah.
couldn't. They said, you don't have the voting machines. And, there's all these different reasons. And the fact is that whether it's a political party or your church, most of the people in our country are familiar with the idea of building toward consensus. And I
Right.
think that's something that, even within the party I've taken a hit for, is the idea that, we're not going to live in a society that, Ayn Rand or anyone else built. We all work together and there's a certain commonality. And I think there is a place where we can get together in the middle and say, this is what our democracy should look like. And that may be where we look at what's happened over the last several years at the federal level and said, that's not what we want our country to be like. And so having more conversation, more opportunity to say, what do we agree on instead of what do we need to fight about? is
Why don't
really
you
what
two
it's
get
about.
together and push for a ballot initiative to get ranked choice voting in
There
Michigan?
actually is an organization out there right now
Yeah,
that is doing that.
and we've talked with them. And I do think it is really important to get people who really believe we need to change our democracy together on something. And it doesn't necessarily have to be pro-green, pro-libertarian, or pro-taxpayers or anyone else. It really comes down to pro-good government and having a more inclusive, participatory government. And
Pro-representative government.
yeah, and we really don't have that now.
No.
Most of the races in the state are decided during the primaries, because of the way
Sure.
they're drawn. And we've gone, and we had 90 people on the ballot in the last election cycle. We have more than everybody else together. And so it's been our purpose to intentionally be in those races that are the closest, because throwing your shoes into the machinery is a good thing, because if the system is broken, you need to point that out. And that's been a big part of why we do what we do. We did a David Letterman top 10 list of reasons why you should vote for the Libertarian Party, and my favorite was the number one, and that was just to upset your parents.
That's always a good idea. Well, this has been fascinating. I don't think anyone who's been watching or listening to us today will ever think that third parties are just spoilers again. I'd like to thank Jennifer Kurland and Bill Jeleno for making time for this podcast
Thank
today.
you.
I'd also like to
here.
thank those who've contributed to help these podcasts going, including the Reverend Pat Thompson from Macomb County. If you too would like to help, I'd be thrilled if you could send a contribution to me via PayPal on my blog, listenberryinc.com, ink is an ink pen, or via snail mail to the Zing Media Group, 186 North Main Street in Plymouth, or message me on my Facebook or via my blog for more details. And if you check out my blog and subscribe to these podcasts, I can tell you the price is right. It's absolutely free. So listen to more episodes. Feel free to send me a message, and I hope I'll see you again. This is Jack Lessenberry. Stand by for my signature essay coming up, and I hope I'll see you again soon. Most politicians, Republicans and Democrats anyway, take a dim view of the very idea of third-party candidates or independent candidates. Republicans are pretty sure that H. Ross Perot cost George Bush his re-election in 1992. Democrats believe they know that if Ralph Nader hadn't been on the ballot in Florida as the Green Party's candidate in 2000, Al Gore would have won. These things both might be true, but so what? Voters are not children. Those who voted for Nader or Perot or for Gary Johnson or Jill Stein clearly had their reasons, and under the Constitution, their reasons are as valid as those of anyone else for voting for whomever. Third parties have, throughout our history, often been the incubators of ideas that were later adopted by one or the other of the major parties. But the fact is that our system does work to discriminate against third parties. This happens in two ways. First, many people, as we've said, who might be inclined to vote for a Libertarian or Green or another candidate, change their mind at the end because if they do, the worst of two major party candidates might win. So they hold their noses and vote for what they believe is the lesser of two evils, or as Jeffrey Feiger once said to me, the less evil of two lessers. My educated guess is that Bill Jeleno and Jennifer Kurland would both have gotten far more votes for governor 2 years ago, except for this. Liberal voters wanted, come hell or high water, to prevent Republican Bill Schuette from being elected. Some anti-abortion conservatives, on the other hand, wanted to stop Gretchen Whitmer, and both sides thought the election would be close. Well, it wasn't. Whitmer won by 400,000 votes. I think if voters had known that, a lot more would have been inclined to escape the two-party straitjacket. There's another problem any third-party candidate for statewide or national office would face if somehow they won. Let's say Ross Perot had been elected president in 1992, something that for a time actually seemed possible until he revealed that he was crazy. He would have faced a Congress full of Democrats and Republicans, all of whom wanted to bring him down. Unless he affiliated with one party or another, or somehow managed to build a coalition, his powers would have been limited to arranging the flowers on his desk. Creating a true new national party capable of contending for seats in Congress and the legislatures would take more money than even Michael Bloomberg has. The only way I can see around that would be to change the system to allow proportional representation. But there is an easy way to allow people to vote third party that shouldn't get the major parties in too much of a tizzy. Ranked choice, or as is sometimes called, individual runoff voting. In its simplest form, voters would be allowed to designate a first or a second choice. If no candidate got a majority of the popular vote, the second choice vote will be counted. Let's say Whitmer had gotten 45% of first round votes and 2% second choice, which is probably fairly realistic. She'd have been declared the winner. But the politicians would see the true number of voters who preferred Libertarian policies, say, or Green policies, and just might adjust their actions and policies accordingly. We'd also have more of a true democracy. This is Jack Lessenberry. Thanks for watching and listening. Hope to see you again soon.